They were expecting generals. That was the first mistake. When the Galactic Coalition issued the summons, they prepared for speeches, negotiations, and the slow dance of political intimidation that had defined interstellar warfare for centuries. They expected uniforms heavy with medals, entourages full of advisors, and voices trained to sound calm while threatening annihilation. What they did not expect was silence. No fleet announcements, no diplomatic fanfare, no war banners lighting the void. Just a single human transport slipping out of hyperspace above the Coalition capital like it had always belonged there. Unarmed, unmarked, unannounced. The station's defense grid locked on automatically, thousands of weapon systems adjusted, targeting the small human vessel from every angle. And still, it didn't respond. Inside the grand concourse of Aurelian Prime, the Coalition Council gathered in uneasy anticipation. This chamber had seen the surrender of empires and the extinction of species. Its walls were carved from living crystal that glowed softly with the energy of 1,000 stars. At the center hovered the table of judgment. Empty. Supreme Marshal Kareth of the Volari stood at the head dais, his 4 eyes narrowing. His species had commanded wars before humans had invented agriculture. He had crushed rebellions that spanned star systems. And yet, something felt wrong. "They're late," hissed Counselor Zeth of the Rawl Hide. "No," Kareth replied quietly. "They are punctual." A ripple passed through the chamber as the doors opened. No procession entered, no guards flanked them, no banners preceded them. Just 6 humans. They wore identical matte black suits, no insignia, no rank markings, no visible weapons. The fabric absorbed the chamber's light instead of reflecting it. Their movements were calm, synchronized, and utterly devoid of hesitation. They didn't look around. They didn't gawk at the chamber. They didn't bow. They walked to the center of the floor and stopped. Kareth studied them carefully. No ceremonial armor, no command badges, no diplomatic posture. These weren't leaders. These were operators. "Where are your generals?" Kareth demanded, his voice echoing with layered authority. One of the humans stepped forward. He was unremarkable by most standards. Short hair, neutral expression, hands clasped behind his back. His eyes, however, were alert in a way Kareth had seen only once before, on a species seconds before launching a suicide strike. "We didn't send generals," the human said calmly. Murmurs erupted across the chamber. Kareth's mandibles flexed. "Then who are you to speak for Earth?" The human met his gaze without blinking. "We're the people generals send," he replied. Silence slammed into the chamber like a physical force. Several counselors shifted uneasily. That answer carried implications most species avoided thinking about. Kareth straightened. "This is a council of war and peace. Your species stands accused of destabilizing 6 sectors, toppling 3 regimes, and eliminating 2 coalition-aligned fleets." The human nodded once. "Correct." "You admit it?" "Yes." Gasps echoed. No justification, no denial, no attempt to soften the truth. Just confirmation. Kareth leaned forward. "Then who are you here without representation?" The human's voice didn't change. "Because this isn't a negotiation." Something cold settled into the room. Another counselor spoke sharply. "Then what is it?" The human paused, just long enough to feel intentional. "A courtesy." That was when the Coalition realized something terrifying. Earth hadn't come to argue. They hadn't come to threaten. They hadn't even come to declare war. They had come to end something. Kareth activated a hologram above the table. Images of destroyed fleets and silent worlds rotated slowly. "These systems were under Coalition protection," he said. "Your forces struck without warning." The human studied the images with detached focus. "Yes. Because warnings give people time to make bad decisions." Kareth's eyes flared. "You slaughtered entire command structures." The human tilted his head slightly. "No. We removed them." "Explain." "Slaughter is emotional," the human replied. "This was procedural.
That word hit harder than any threat. Procedural. You see, your fleets weren't defeated in battle. They were dismantled. A subtle gesture from one of the other humans caused a holographic projection to activate. Human combat footage. Coalition ships freezing mid-engagement. Command bridge going dark in seconds. Officers collapsing before alarms could finish sounding. No chaos. No heroic last stands. Just efficiency. Kareth felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Fear. You claim superiority? Kareth challenged. The human shook his head. No. Then what do you claim? The human leaned forward slightly. Intent. The chamber was deathly still now. For centuries, he said, you fought wars by escalation. Threats. Counter-threats. Show of force. He gestured vaguely around the chamber. Generals. Councils. Committees. His eyes hardened. Humans don't do that when survival is on the line. Kareth's voice dropped. Then what do humans do? The human answered without hesitation. We end problems before they grow. A senior coalition strategist stood abruptly. You assassinated leaders. The human nodded. Yes. That's barbaric. No. The human corrected calmly. Barbaric is sending millions to die so leaders can keep their titles. The strategist fell silent. Kareth realized then what these humans truly were. Not diplomats, not soldiers, not commanders. They were finishers. You believe this grants you leverage? Kareth asked carefully. The human smiled faintly. No, he said. He tapped the table once. This is us being polite. Every defense system on Aurelian Prime suddenly went offline. Not destroyed. Offline. Lights dimmed across the chamber as emergency systems tried. And failed. To engage. The humans didn't move. They didn't raise weapons. They didn't threaten. They simply stood there. Proving a point. Kareth swallowed. What do you want? He asked. The human straightened. We want you to understand something, he said. You summoned generals because you thought this was a war. He looked around the chamber, meeting every alien gaze one by one. We didn't. And that was when the coalition finally understood the truth. When Earth stopped sending generals, it meant the decision had already been made.
The silence after the power failure lasted exactly 7 seconds. 7 seconds in which the most powerful governing body in known space realized they were no longer in control of anything. Not their station, not their fleets, not even their own breathing. Then emergency lights snapped on. Dim, red, ineffective. Coalition technicians scrambled at their consoles, mandibles clicking in panic, bioluminescent skins flickering erratically. Commanders shouted orders that went nowhere. Backup systems failed one after another, as if reality itself had decided to ignore them. And through it all, the humans didn't move. They didn't touch consoles. They didn't issue commands. They didn't even look impressed. They just waited. Supreme Marshal Kareth forced himself to breathe slowly. Panic was contagious, and he could not afford it, not now. He straightened his posture, projecting authority out of pure instinct. You have violated sovereign space, he said, his voice steadier than he felt. This station is the heart of the coalition. If you believe disabling systems grants you victory. The human spokesperson raised a single finger. Kareth stopped mid-sentence. Not because he was forced to, because something deep in his instincts told him to. That, the human said calmly, is assumption number 2. Kareth narrowed his eyes. And the first? That this meeting was optional. A chill rippled through the chamber. You shut down our defenses, Kareth said. That is an act of war. The human nodded once. Correct. Murmurs erupted again, louder this time. Then why, Kareth demanded, are you still standing there instead of attacking? The human glanced briefly at his teammates. They didn't nod. They didn't signal. They simply waited. Because, the human replied, we already won the war before we arrived. The words hit harder than any explosion. Kareth scoffed, forcing confidence. That's impossible. Our fleets are blind, the human interrupted gently. A hologram flickered back to life above the table, not powered by coalition systems, but by something else, something external. It displayed dozens of star systems, coalition space. Every major fleet position pulsed in red. Then, one by one, the pulses vanished. Not destroyed, disconnected. You don't deploy fleets the way we do, the human explained. You centralize command. You value hierarchy, rank. He gestured toward the council benches. You believe control flows downward. The image shifted, coalition command trees collapsing as nodes went dark. We believe control is a vulnerability. Kareth's throat tightened. You decapitated our command structure. The human nodded. Yes. Without declaring war? Yes. That violates every rule you wrote to protect yourselves, the human finished, not to survive. Kareth stared at the projection. Entire armadas were still intact, but leaderless, unreachable. Admirals locked in recursive failsafes they couldn't override. They'll recover, Kareth said weakly. The human's eyes hardened for the first time. No, he said, they won't. He tapped the table again. New footage appeared. Coalition admirals collapsing mid-sentence. Fleet commanders frozen as neural inhibitors triggered. High-ranking officers restrained by their own security teams, confused, terrified, alive. We didn't kill your fleets. We removed the people who give them purpose. Kareth felt something crack inside his certainty. Why? Demanded Counselor Zeph. Why not destroy us outright? The human turned toward Zeph. Because destruction teaches nothing, he said. Survival does. He stepped forward, just one pace, but the effect was immediate. Several counselors leaned back instinctively. You've spent centuries fighting wars that look impressive, the human continued. Massive fleets, planetary sieges, casualties measured in millions. His voice sharpened. We don't fight wars to look powerful. He paused. We fight them to end. Kareth clenched his fists. Then explain your methods. The human nodded. Humans don't escalate, we conclude. A different human activated another projection. This one showed historical conflicts, human wars from centuries past. Small units, targeted strikes, leadership removals, supply chain collapses. Early in our history, the human explained, we learned something painful. The footage showed cities burning, endless trenches, mountains of dead. Wars fought between armies last forever. The image shifted. Wars fought against leadership end quickly. Kareth's voice dropped. You turned assassination into doctrine. The human shook his head. No, he said, we turned accountability into inevitability. That word again, inevitability. You don't fear death the way we do, Kareth said slowly. The human considered that. No, he replied, we fear stagnation. The chamber grew quiet. You rule through stability, the human continued. Predictability, order. He gestured toward the room. But stability built on fear is fragile. Kareth's eyes flickered to his fellow counselors. He saw it now, the doubt, the fractures. What are you saying? Kareth asked. I'm saying, the human replied, that your coalition only works because no one has ever shown your leaders they can be reached. He leaned forward slightly. We just did. A coalition military advisor slammed a clawed fist on the table. You expect us to submit? The human's response was immediate. No. The advisor froze. We expect you to change, the human continued, or collapse. Kareth exhaled slowly. You think this ends here? The human's expression softened, almost regretfully. This ended before we arrived, he said. Another counselor whispered, what happens now? The human straightened. Now, he said, you decide whether the next time we come. He looked directly at Kareth. We bother knocking. Every defense system in the chamber suddenly came back online. Lights flared, power surged, system stabilized. The humans hadn't destroyed anything. They had demonstrated restraint. And restraint, Kareth realized, was far more terrifying than force. The human team turned as one. They walked toward the doors. No rush, no triumph, no threats shouted over their shoulders. Just quiet confidence. As the doors closed behind them, Kareth finally understood the truth that would echo through coalition history. Earth didn't send generals because generals argue. Earth sent killers in army suits because the argument was already over.
The council chamber remained silent long after the humans had left. Not the calm silence of order, the kind that comes after a predator passes through tall grass, and everything alive waits to see what is missing. Supreme Marshal Kareth finally sank back into his seat. For the first time in his career, there was no protocol to follow, no doctrine, no response tree. Because no one had ever planned for an enemy who didn't want territory, didn't want tribute, didn't even want surrender. They wanted change. Around the chamber, counselors whispered in low, frightened tones. Some checked data pads that still refused to connect to high-level channels. Others stared at the doors the humans had exited through, as if expecting them to reopen at any moment. They let us live, Counselor Zeth said quietly. Kareth nodded. That's what terrifies me. A military analyst rose hesitantly. Supreme Marshal, emergency reports are coming in. Not attacks, just Confirmations. Confirmations of what? Kareth asked. The analyst swallowed. Of absence. A holo display activated. Across coalition space, red indicators appeared. Not explosions, not invasions, but vacancies. Governors missing, admirals detained, strategic coordinators placed under internal arrest by their own security forces. No resistance? Kareth asked. None, the analyst replied. They didn't even know it was happening. Human teams appeared, executed retrieval protocols, and vanished. Local forces complied before understanding why. A shudder went through the chamber. They turned our own systems against us, Zeth whispered. No, Kareth corrected. They turned our people against us. Another counselor stood. This is psychological warfare. Kareth's gaze hardened. No, this is something worse. He stood slowly. This is cultural warfare. The words hung heavy. We built a civilization on the belief that leadership was sacred, Kareth continued, untouchable, above consequence. He clenched his claws. They just proved it's not. Suddenly, a new signal cut through. Not from coalition space, from Earth. The room froze. A single transmission window opened, audio only. The same human voice spoke, calm, measured, unavoidable. This is not a threat, the voice said. It's an explanation. Kareth gestured sharply. Let it play. You believed humanity was reckless, the voice continued, violent, unstable. A pause. You were right. Several counselors stiffened. But you assumed that made us weak, the human said. You assumed chaos meant lack of control. Another pause. Deliberate. In truth, the voice said, it forced us to master control over ourselves. Kareth felt the weight at every word. We are not unified by species, the human continued. We are unified by doctrine. Images streamed across the hollow. Human soldiers in vastly different environments. Deserts, frozen wastes, dense cities, alien worlds. Same posture, same discipline, same eyes. You fight as nations, the voice said. We fight as humans. The feed shifted. Human units training not just for combat, but negotiation, extraction, sabotage, psychological operations. You call our operatives killers, the human said. A faint edge entered the voice. We call them finishers. A counselor gasped. Generals debate wars, the voice continued. Politicians delay them. Armies prolong them. Another pause. Finishers. End them. Kareth's voice was low. This was planned long before first contact. Yes, the human replied. From the moment we learned you existed. Shock rippled through the chamber. You built contingency plans against us, Zeth accused. No, the human corrected. We built inevitability. The display shifted again. Coalition historical records, analyzed and annotated. Power structures, succession protocols, fear responses, cultural breaking points. You are predictable, the human said. Not because you're inferior, but because you never had to adapt. Kareth felt exposed, like his entire civilization had been disassembled and catalogued. What do you want? He asked finally. The answer came immediately. Reform, the human said. Transparency, accountability. And if we refuse, another counselor demanded. Silence. Then the next phase begins. A new image appeared. Not a fleet, not a weapon, a list. Names, hundreds of them. Coalition elites, industrial magnates, political dynasties. Every name on that list, the human said, has already been judged by your own laws. Kareth's eyes widened. You accessed sealed records. We accessed truth, the human replied. Your people deserve better than symbols. The list vanished. You have 6 standard cycles, the voice said. Implement reforms, remove those who profit from suffering. And if we comply, Kareth asked. The human's tone softened, almost humanly. Then we leave, he said, and you never hear from us again. A counselor whispered. And if we don't? The answer chilled the room. Then you'll remember us, the human said, every time one of your leaders disappears in the night. The transmission ended. The chamber sat in stunned silence. Finally, Kareth spoke. They didn't threaten annihilation, he said. Zeth swallowed. They threatened exposure. Kareth looked around at the faces of the council. For the first time, they looked small. They didn't come to conquer us, he said quietly. They came to prove we were already broken. Outside the station, coalition fleets drifted, still powerful, still massive, but leaderless.
And across the galaxy, a terrifying realization began to spread. Humanity did not fear empires. They studied them. And when the time came, they didn't send generals. They sent the ones who end stories.
6 standard cycles. That was all the time the Coalition had been given. To most civilizations, 6 cycles was nothing, barely enough to convene committees, draft statements, assign blame. To the Galactic Coalition, it was a death sentence. Because the first fractures appeared within hours. The Coalition worlds had always believed in the myth of unity, that no matter their differences, the Council stood above corruption, that their leaders were chosen for wisdom, not ambition. The humans shattered that illusion with one list. Across thousands of systems, the same pattern emerged. Mid-level officials began leaking sealed documents. Military officers quietly removed superiors pending investigation. Corporate dynasties started evacuating assets, trying to disappear into the fringes. And the people, the trillions who had lived under the Coalition banner, began asking questions for the first time in centuries. Why were certain laws never enforced? Why did food shortages always hit the same sectors? Why were entire species labeled non-essential in economic planning documents? The answers were everywhere, and they were damning. On the capital world of Aurelian Prime, Supreme Marshal Kareth watched it unfold in real time. Holoscreens filled the command hall, each one a different world slipping toward unrest. "This is spreading faster than any invasion," his aide whispered. Kareth nodded slowly. "Because it's not fear-driven." He clenched his claws. "It's clarity." Aurelian skies burned that night, not with weapons fire, but with light. Millions of civilians gathered in the open plazas, holding up holoprojectors broadcasting the same phrase across the planet: accountability now. Kareth had commanded fleets. He had crushed rebellions. But he had never faced something like this. Because for the first time, the enemy wasn't outside. It was truth. Inside the council chamber, the ruling elite argued in raised voices. "This is human manipulation," Councillor Vesh snarled. "They planted this unrest." Kareth turned on him. "No, they revealed it." Vesh recoiled. "You would side with them?" "I would side with reality," Kareth replied coldly. Another councillor hissed, "If we comply, we lose control." Kareth's voice dropped. "If we don't, we lose everything." That was when the betrayal came. Without warning, emergency shutters slammed down around the chamber. Armed security units poured in, not the usual honor guard, but private forces loyal to the old dynasties. Councillor Vesh smiled. "This council is dissolved," he declared, "for the good of the Coalition." Kareth drew his weapon, but froze. The guards weren't pointing at him. They were pointing at Vesh. The chamber doors opened again, and 2 humans walked in. No armor, no weapons visible. Just black suits, tailored perfectly. Coalition clearance badges glowing faintly. "How?" Vesh began. One human raised a small device. "Jurisdiction transfer," she said calmly. "Signed by 73 member worlds." The guard stepped back immediately. Vesh staggered. "You can't. This is illegal." The second human met his gaze. "So was everything you did." Kareth stared at them. "You said you wouldn't interfere." "We didn't," the woman replied. "Your people asked for help. We simply ensured the paperwork was correct." Vesh collapsed as Coalition law enforcement moved in, reading charges that stretched back centuries. Kareth exhaled slowly. "You planned this," he answered. "Yes, but not the way you think." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "We didn't know which of you would choose reform, so we prepared for all outcomes." Kareth looked at the human. "And if no one had?" The man's expression hardened. "Then we would have dismantled the Coalition piece by piece, without firing a single shot." Across the galaxy, the second phase quietly began. Human operatives withdrew. Not because the mission was over, but because the test was underway. Would the Coalition rebuild honestly? Or would it rot again? On Earth, deep beneath old mountains and forgotten cities, humanity watched. Not with triumph, with caution. "Probability of long-term reform?" a human analyst asked. Elias, the same man who had spoken to the council, stood silently before answering. 58%. "Acceptable?" someone asked.
Elias nodded once. Because for the first time, he said, they're afraid of themselves. The galaxy had always feared human weapons. They never imagined they'd fear human restraint more. And somewhere in the void, unseen and uncelebrated,
3
the
cycles
ones in
remained.
black suits packed away their
The
tools.
coalition was
They had
quieter
not
now.
conquered an empire.
Too
They had
quiet.
forced it to look in a mirror.
Across thousands of systems,
was always
emergency
the most
laws were
dangerous weapon
repealed,
humanity possessed.
councils dissolved, and old power structures dismantled in a rush that felt less like reform and more like fear-driven survival. That was exactly what worried humanity. Fear could inspire change, but it could also inspire lies. On Aurelian Prime, Supreme Marshal Kareth stood alone on the balcony of the High Spire, watching transport ships leave the atmosphere in steady streams. The elites were fleeing, those who hadn't been arrested, those who still believed they could outrun consequence. The coalition was bleeding leadership, and something else: trust. A secure channel chimed behind him. Marshal Kareth, Elias said calmly, his image flickering into view. We're detecting anomalous fleet movements in your outer sectors. Kareth didn't turn around. They're mine, he said. What's left of them? Elias studied him. You didn't inform the council. There is no council, Kareth replied bitterly. Only a vacuum, and vacuums invite monsters. He finally turned, meeting Elias's eyes. They're scared, Kareth said. They think you're waiting to finish what you started. Elias nodded once. We are. Kareth stiffened. You said you wouldn't rule us. We won't, Elias replied. But we also won't allow history to repeat itself. Kareth took a slow breath. Then you leave me no choice. Moments later, a system-wide broadcast lit up the skies of Aurelian Prime. Kareth's voice echoed across the planet. Citizens of the Coalition, we stand at the edge of extinction, not from human weapons, but from our own legacy. I am invoking Emergency Continuity Protocol Alpha. Elias's expression darkened. That protocol transfers absolute military authority to a single commander, one of his advisors warned. Kareth continued. This authority will last until order is restored. Resistance will be classified as treason. On Earth, silence filled the war room. Not anger, disappointment. So, a strategist murmured, this is how it ends. Elias raised a hand. No, this is where it decides. He opened a channel, one that bypassed coalition systems entirely. Every screen on Aurelian Prime flickered. And then humanity spoke, not through threats, not through weapons, but through a memory. Cities appeared, old Earth cities, bombed, frozen, starved. Children wrapped in blankets beneath artificial skies. A voice followed, calm, human. This is what survival under absolute authority looks like. We know, because we lived it. The feed shifted. Earth's darkest centuries, dictatorships, purges, walls, camps. We tried your way, the voice continued. Order without accountability, safety without freedom. The final image showed Earth now, alive, rebuilt, blazing with light. It failed us, every time. Kareth staggered back. What is this? He whispered. Elias answered quietly. A warning, and a choice. Coalition fleets halted mid-deployment. Soldiers lowered weapons. Civilians filled the streets again, but this time not in protest, in resolve. Kareth's command authority evaporated in real time as captains refused orders, citing newly ratified emergency charters passed by planetary assemblies, documents written with human assistance. Kareth slumped into his chair. I wanted to save us, he said. Elias's voice softened. So did we. Kareth looked up. Then why not finish it? Take control. Rule us. You've already won. Elias shook his head. Because the moment we do, he said, we become the thing you fear. He stood. This was never about punishment. It was about proof. Proof of what? Kareth asked. That power doesn't make monsters, Elias replied. Avoiding responsibility does. With hours remaining, the coalition made its final decision. Emergency powers were revoked. A temporary civilian Congress was formed, species inclusive, transparent, monitored by neutral observers, human observers, not enforcers, witnesses. At the final cycle, Elias addressed the galaxy one last time. We are withdrawing all operatives. No sanctions, no occupation, no hidden hands. A pause. But understand this. We are watching, not as rulers, as neighbors. The transmission ended. Human ships vanished into slipspace. No victory parade, no conquest, only silence. Years later, historians would struggle to classify what happened. It wasn't a war. It wasn't diplomacy. It was something new. A civilization that won by refusing to dominate. And across the galaxy, a new phrase entered common speech, spoken in awe, fear, and respect. Don't wake the humans.
Because Earth didn't send generals. They sent proof. And the galaxy was never the same again. If this story moved you, subscribe for more human stories from the stars. Together, we will continue to explore the heights of the human spirit. Until next time, keep looking up.